What's up guys? So in this video I'm just gonna go over some of the things that I would do to my bike before I really start wheeling on it and ripping on it. I get messages all the time from people asking what they need to do to their bike to make it wheelie, and I'm just gonna go over all of that in this video. First thing is suspension. Suspension is really important just because you got to bring up the back of the bike, especially if it's slammed down. Some of the Sportster models, they go really low in the back. They're really hard to get it up with that height. So you got to go up at least like 2 inches over stock. That'll bring the back of the bike up. It'll bring the whole center of gravity up, and it'll make it a lot easier to pivot the bike and get it back. So I usually do 14 inches. That's a pretty good spot to start with. If you want to go taller, that's up to you. But anything lower than that, it's going to be definitely harder to get it up. In the front, you're going to want to do upgraded springs, just because when you come down from the wheelie, these bikes are really heavy, and you will bottom out your springs and you'll start blowing fork seals. I ran stock suspension for a while and I ended up crashing because of it, just because I came down too hard from a wheelie. I was on a bad patch of road. My front wheel hit a bump while it was fully bottomed out, and my wheel hopped and it just started tank slapping on me, because when it hopped I didn't expect it, and it kind of shifted and it just started slapping. Just get upgraded fork springs, upgraded suspension in the rear, just go a little bit higher in the rear, and it'll really help that bike come up on you. That's the first 2 things that'll help you get it up. Once you get it up, next is oil. You don't need to change the oil pump or anything on these. They're pretty good to go. There's no companies that do aftermarkets or anything like that. For the Dynas, they got oil pan mods and all kinds of stuff, the baggers too. But for these, you don't really need that. The only thing you need to do is you gotta fill these tanks up almost to the brim with oil. That way when you're back at 12, the oil can still reach these 2 little pickups right here and still get sucked into the motor. At 3 quarts, the recommended level, it's not enough to really get into there, and I was running 3 quarts for a while, and I ended up frying my pistons and jugs because of it. It literally just wasn't getting oil when I was back that far. So, you know, you live and you learn. Now I know. Fill them up, make sure they're up to the brim. You should be good on that. Next thing is if you have a carved bike, you're going to want to get a Mikuni. Some people can tinker with the CV carbs. I kind of played with mine on my other 05 and kind of got it working. But the Mikuni, if you just upgrade that, it'll stop it from flooding out on you when you get all the way back. Mine, on my other bike, I would get back and it would start flooding and bogging. So upgrade to a Mikuni. There's a little mod you got to do. You got to cap off this overflow right here, and you got to drill a little tiny hole in the top of the carb right there. I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's a little hole right there. That's your new overflow, so that when you tilt back, gas doesn't pour out of that overflow in the bottom. You can still wheelie with it without this, but you'll just be dumping gas the whole time you're wheeling out of the overflow. Next is probably a seat. You want to get a seat that's going to lock you in. It's going to keep you on the bike. You're not sliding all around. That's going to help you stay in control. You want to get some handlebars. They don't got to be T-bars. They don't got to be tall risers like this. You can keep them low, but just don't get ape hangers or anything like that. They got too much play in them, so if you come down too hard, they'll flex and bend and move. You want to get something rigid that's not going to move on you no matter how hard you come down. If you plan on scraping it, you're going to be blowing through fenders. So what I do is I buy the Bunking Bracket. It mounts up underneath the fender right here. It mounts to this hole and this hole. You just bolt it up and it'll mount straight to your struts. It comes back and it usually has a little plate that comes out with little rubber pieces in the middle so it can like push in. I just take that part off and I bolt titanium straight to it. I get my titanium from Homegrown Industries. He's got pretty good deals, and he sells a bunch of different sizes and widths. Next is get a crash bar. That's going to help you if you go down. It's going to save your tank. It's going to save a lot of things. Definitely recommended to get a crash bar. You're going to drop it if you're doing this stuff, and you want to have that peace of mind to know you're not going to ruin your whole bike when you do drop it. Get an upgraded clutch with a extra clutch plate. These stock clutches, they come with a little rivet plate that's known to break apart when you really get on it and hammer it too hard and do burnouts and stuff like that. So get the extra clutch plate. That'll save the rivets, because once that rivet plate breaks, those rivets just fly all over the primary, and it'll ruin your clutch hub. It can ruin other things, and you'll have to replace all of that. So it's just a nightmare. Just upgrade the clutch. That'll save you a lot of money in the long run. Next is the rear brakes. If you have an older Sportster, it's going to have a single piston brake, which it'll do the job. There's nothing wrong with it. It just is more likely to overheat if you only have one piston, just because fluid's only flowing to that one piston. It's only one contact point. So when the pads get hot from rubbing on the rotor, it'll transfer it to the caliper. Everything just gets hotter faster, which means your pads will get hotter. If they get too hot, they'll build a glaze on them and they'll start fading out on you. They won't be able to work properly. So you don't want brake fade in a wheelie. That's what one major lifesaver is, your brake. So I upgrade my rotor. I just get a slotted rotor. I go through Wilwood. They make some pretty good ones. They're not too bad. They're like 90 bucks. And it just puts more slots in the rotor so it dissipates heat better. These are only things that you got to do if you're really ripping on this thing and you're going to parking lots and doing wheelies back and forth, or riding really long wheelies down the road. If you're just doing a wheelie here or there, suspension, just make sure the oil's good, and I'd probably recommend getting a clutch just for those. But if you're really ripping on this thing, definitely look into the rotor, because one, it's going to grab better, and two, it's going to help that dissipation of heat. A pipe, that doesn't really matter. You can run any pipe you want. It's not going to really change the performance of the motor too much. It helps a little bit with back pressure, but it's not necessary for wheelies. These things got plenty of power to wheelie. Next is chain kits or belts. You can run a chain or a belt on a Sportster, in my opinion. These bikes aren't super heavy. Compared to like a Dyna or a Bagger. They're really hard to change belts on those because they have a whole primary right here, and you have to remove the whole primary to get to the belt pulley. With this bike, it's like 4 bolts. You take that one off, that one, there's a bolt down there. You can pull this off, slide a new belt on, you're on your way. So I just run belts. I have extra ones in my garage. But if you do get a chain kit, I would recommend upgrading your axle adjuster, and really making sure you tension these bolts down and you torque them down right, and you use red Loctite, because if these bolts back out even a little bit with the chain, that instant torque will snap those bolts, and you'll either get stuck with bolts in your hub, or it'll just strip your hub out completely and you'll have to retap it and put new bolts in it, and that's no fun. I've seen that happen to plenty of people. So you can run a chain if you want, but for me, I just like the belt. The chain's a nice little peace of mind to know you don't have to worry about the belt snapping, but it's not really necessary with these bikes. Unless it's an old belt, you probably aren't going to have any problems with it snapping. That's pretty much it though. There's not much you need to do to these things. They're pretty much good to go stock. You just need to get the suspension. That'll help you get it up, help you when you come down, make sure the oil's filled up. It's a 42 millimeter Mikuni. Just upgrade that, and that'll help you from flooding when you get all the way back at 12. When you get to that point, pretty much it. It's not really that crazy. I just get so many messages of people asking me what to do and why their bike won't wheelie. It's all just seat time. You got to get the clutch pop right. You gotta get used to the bike and the power band. I would recommend learning on a small bike if you're gonna try to wheelie these things. If you don't have foot brake control and you really don't know what to do when you get to balance, I would just recommend getting like a little pit bike or a little Grom or something, getting balance point on that, getting the foot brake control so that you can really coast them and drop back and slow them down. And then when you transfer to the bike, you'll have all of the clutch control and everything there. If you have to learn on this, just remember, cover your brake. That is your lifeline. A lot of people don't realize that, but when you get back at 12, that's the only thing that stops you from looping. Don't chase them out all the time. If you're just learning, bring them up, tap the brake, bring it down. Bring it up, tap the brake, bring it down. Just do that, get further and further back. Make the brake pull you down. Get used to using that to pull you down. Don't chase them out. Don't go for distance until you got that brake control. But other than that, these bikes are pretty much good to go. They got plenty of power. Like I said, they're not super heavy. I mean, they're heavy compared to like a sport bike. Compared to Dynas and Baggers and other Harleys, these are the lightest ones you're gonna get. So these are gonna wheelie pretty much right off the factory floor. You can get them. It's just with that suspension being so low in the back, it's going to be hard to get it up. The whole center of gravity is a lot different, so cover that foot brake. I can't stress it enough. Just cover the foot brake and just practice. It takes time. This doesn't happen overnight. I get tons of comments and I spend so much time just sending the same stuff to so many people. I'll do a how-to video eventually, but until then, make sure you like the video, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys next time.